A wounded lion returned to the old man's home after years of silence, only to sit at the doorstep for days, refusing to eat or leave, as if waiting for someone he still believed was alive. No one understood why a king of the savannah would show such unwavering loyalty, or what heartbreak had driven him back across the plains. But when the truth finally came to light, everyone fell silent. Please consider subscribing to the channel to follow the rest of this story, because what happens next is something you truly won't believe. The late afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, washing the Kenyan plains in a deep burnt orange glow. The old wooden farmhouse stood alone at the edge of the reserve, its paint chipped and weathered from decades of dust storms and relentless heat. Inside, silence wrapped around the rooms like a heavy blanket. For years, this place had echoed with the steady rhythm of an old man's life, his careful footsteps, his slow humming, his crackling radio. Now it felt as though the house itself was holding its breath. Outside, the dry wind swept across the tall grass, carrying with it the faint, earthy scent of the savannah. Birds circled overhead, restless and uneasy. Even the zebras grazing in the distance kept lifting their heads, staring toward the farmhouse as though sensing something that didn't belong. It wasn't until the sun was almost gone that a deep shadow separated itself from the tree line and stepped into the open. A massive lion, built like a living monument of muscle and memory, emerged from the fading daylight. His mane, thick and golden with streaks darkened by age and dust, rippled slightly in the breeze. His amber eyes glowed with a quiet intensity as he moved toward the farmhouse, not with the prowling caution of a predator, but with the deliberate calm of someone who knew exactly where he needed to be. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. For a long time, he didn't move. He simply stood there, staring at the old front door, as though he expected it to open. Then, slowly, he lowered himself onto the ground, first his massive forelegs, then the rest of his body, until he rested on the cool earth. His tail curled around him, his ears twitched, his breathing steadied. And then he began to wait. The few villagers who lived miles away had long known the stories about the old man and the lion he once saved. Some believed the stories were exaggerated, others romanticized. But everyone agreed on one thing. No wild lion ever came this close to a human home unless something was terribly wrong. So when a ranger on patrol spotted the lion sitting calmly at the porch, he froze in disbelief. He watched the animal from behind a cluster of shrubs. No growling, no aggression, no signs of territorial behavior. Only a strange stillness, almost mournful. The ranger radioed the station immediately, unsure whether he was reporting a dangerous threat or something far more unsettling. As darkness settled fully over the plains, the farmhouse became a silhouette against the vast African sky. The lion lifted his head once, listening as if hoping to hear footsteps or a familiar voice. But the house remained still. No lights flickered on inside. No floorboards creaked. No gentle cough or tired sigh drifted through the open window. The wind picked up, brushing through the lion's mane. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the breeze wash over him, and a low, soft rumble escaped his chest, not a roar, not a warning, but something closer to a sound of longing. It vibrated through the night, subtle yet heavy with meaning. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher. Hyenas called in the distance, and the air cooled until the grass shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. Still, the lion remained on the porch steps, lifting his head only when some distant noise stirred him. His massive chest rose and fell steadily as he watched the door. Each breath a quiet testament to a patience that did not belong to a wild creature. What no one knew, what the lion himself could not understand, was that the man he had come for would never again step through that door. The old man, the one who once nursed him, fed him, and whispered encouragement into his ears when he was a fragile cub on the brink of death, had taken his final breath 5 days earlier. But the scent of the man still lingered faintly in the air, weaving itself through the corners of the porch and seeping from the cracks in the wooden frame. It was enough to anchor the lion there, enough to make him believe that waiting would bring the old man back. So he waited, and with each silent hour that passed, the mystery of his return grew heavier, like a storm gathering on the horizon, unseen, but impossible to escape. Years before the lion's massive frame cast its shadow across the steps of the farmhouse, the old man had lived a life carved by loss. His name was Walter Hayes, a retired wildlife photographer who had moved to Kenya after his wife passed away, hoping the wide horizons would soften the sharp edges of grief. But solitude followed him even here, echoing through the empty rooms of his farmhouse and filling the long evenings with a stillness that felt heavier than silence. One blistering afternoon, long before the lion became the desert king he was now, Walter had been walking along the outskirts of the reserve with a camera slung over his shoulder. Heat waves shimmered off the rocks, and the air hummed with the faint buzz of insects. He was searching for a herd of elephants rumored to be migrating early that year, but fate placed something entirely different in his path. He heard it before he saw it, a faint, broken cry, thin as wind slipping through old wooden boards. Walter paused, listening. The sound came again, desperate and trembling. He followed it through a patch of acacia trees until he reached a shallow, dry riverbed. There, curled beneath a fallen branch, lay a tiny lion cub. Its body was frail, its fur matted with dust and streaked with blood. Its ribs showed with every shallow breath. One of its back legs was twisted awkwardly. Clearly injured, Walter knelt slowly, careful not to startle the creature. The cub lifted its head with effort, revealing eyes too large for its small face, amber eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. It tried to growl, but the sound collapsed into a weak whimper. He scanned the area for signs of a pride. A mother lion would never willingly leave her young, and a cub this small could not survive more than a few hours alone. When Walter spotted the trap, a rusted snare half hidden by the bushes, his stomach tightened. The metal teeth were stained with fresh blood. The mother hadn't abandoned her cub. She had died trying to protect it. Walter sat beside the cub for a long moment, feeling the weight of its tiny, desperate breaths. He knew the rules. He knew he wasn't supposed to interfere with wildlife, especially predators. But he also knew something else. He could not walk away. He carefully slipped off his shirt and wrapped the cub in it, feeling the fragile warmth of the small body against his hands. The cub trembled, releasing another soft cry. Walter whispered softly, not words of comfort so much as gentle sounds meant to steady the creature's fear. He cradled it close as he made his way back to the farmhouse, every step filled with a growing sense of responsibility he had not felt since raising his daughter decades earlier. He cleaned the cub's wounds with warm water, the animal flinching with every touch but too weak to resist. He splinted the broken leg with strips of wood and cloth. For days, he fed the cub drops of goat's milk from a syringe, keeping it nestled in blankets near the fireplace. At night, he sometimes woke to hear the cub's tiny whimpers, and he would sit beside it, whispering stories he once told his daughter when she was small. Slowly, its breathing steadied, its eyes brightened, its strength began to return. Weeks passed, and the cub grew strong enough to wander the farmhouse on unsteady legs. It followed Walter from room to room, stumbling after him with clumsy paws. It stumbled over rugs, bumped into table legs, and occasionally tumbled forward like a fluffy ball of golden determination. Walter found himself laughing again, real, deep laughter that he had not heard from his own throat in years. The cub bonded with him quickly, pressing its small body against his leg as he cooked, or nudging his hand until he scratched beneath its chin. At night, it slept curled against the foot of his bed, purring so softly it sounded like the hum of distant thunder. But as the cub grew, so did Walter's fears. He knew he could not keep it. A lion, no matter how loved, belonged to the wild. It deserved a pride, a territory, a life not bound by human walls. When the cub finally reached the age where its steps grew confident and its instincts sharpened, Walter contacted the rangers. Together, they prepared a transitional enclosure at the edge of the reserve. The day he released the cub was the hardest since losing his family. He knelt beside it, placing a hand on its growing mane. Its eyes, still amber and filled with a fierce, innocent loyalty, locked onto his. Walter swallowed hard and whispered a promise that it would live free and that he would never forget it. The cub walked away slowly at first, looking back again and again. Then, with a final glance, it disappeared into the tall grass. Walter stood there long after it was gone, feeling both emptier and more whole than he had in years. Years drifted by, each season carving new lines into Walter's aging face and new stories into the savannah. He still walked the same dirt paths every morning, still photographed the migrating herds, and still paused at the edge of the reserve where he had released the cub. Sometimes he imagined he saw a golden silhouette far in the distance, watching him. Other times he would hear a faint roar rolling across the plains and wonder if it belonged to the lion he once saved. But the savannah kept its secrets, and Walter accepted that he might never truly know what had become of the creature he had raised like his own blood. Then came the evening when everything changed. A ranger named Michael Turner was conducting his routine patrol near Walter's farmhouse when he noticed the grazing antelope suddenly scatter in every direction. The air grew charged, tense. Predators moved this way, silent, decisive, unstoppable. Michael positioned his jeep toward the disturbance, gripping the wheel. But what stepped out onto the open dirt road made him slam the brakes. A full-grown male lion, larger than any he had seen in years, stood in the path. His mane was thick and rugged, woven with the dust and shadows of countless battles. His shoulders rolled with power, and every muscle spoke of dominance earned, not inherited. But what struck Michael most wasn't the lion's size. It was his eyes, deep amber, steady, and strangely calm. This was not a lion on the hunt. Michael followed the lion's movements cautiously as the animal continued toward the farmhouse. The sun dipped lower, painting the ground in long, trembling shadows. The lion showed no interest in the wildlife around him. He walked with a purpose so focused it sent chills up Michael's spine. When the farmhouse came into view, the lion's pace slowed. He approached the wooden steps with the same familiarity as someone returning to a childhood home. He lifted his head, inhaling the air, nostrils flaring as though searching for a scent he desperately needed to find. Inside the house, everything remained still. The ranger remained hidden behind the jeep, careful not to provoke the animal, but nothing about the lion's demeanor reflected aggression. Instead, his movements held a quiet sorrow. He circled the house once, brushing his mane against the old window frames. Dust fell from the wood. His tail swept low, not in dominance, but in hesitation. He returned to the front door again, sitting down heavily. His ears twitched at fading sounds in the distance, crickets beginning their nightly chorus, the faint whistle of the wind pressing against the tall grass. He lowered his head, letting it rest against the first step, the same way a loyal dog might wait for someone who never came home. Michael radioed the station, whispering urgently. But as he watched, he felt his fear turning into something else, something closer to heartbreak. This lion wasn't claiming territory. He wasn't seeking prey. He was seeking someone. The more Michael observed, the more the truth gnawed at him. This lion knew the house. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't lost. He had come back. The sky darkened, and the lion made no attempt to leave. He remained anchored to the porch, staring at the door as though expecting it to open at any moment. The last light of day clung to his mane, illuminating the faint scars that lined his shoulders and chest. He had survived storms, rival males, droughts, and dangers hidden beneath moonless nights. Yet now he waited like a creature who feared something far more painful than death. He feared loss. Michael felt a weight settle in his chest. This lion had returned not as the fragile cub Walter once saved, but as a king of the savannah, powerful, resilient, yet unmistakably grieving. And though Michael did not yet fully understand what tied the lion to the old farmhouse, he sensed one thing clearly. This return was not accidental, and whatever the lion was waiting for, it was not coming through that door. By the next morning, word had spread across the reserve. A full-grown male lion was camped at the porch of Walter Hayes's farmhouse and had not moved since sunset. Rangers, villagers, and curious onlookers kept their distance, forming a quiet perimeter around the property. No one dared get too close. But what unsettled them most was not fear, it was confusion. Lions were unpredictable, territorial, and fiercely independent. Yet this one behaved like neither a threat nor a wild beast. He behaved like something was breaking inside him. Michael Turner returned at dawn with 2 other rangers. They watched from behind a cluster of brush as the lion remained curled at the steps, his heavy breathing visible in the cool morning air. His head rested against the wooden doorframe, and the porch creaked under his weight each time he shifted. When Michael approached a few cautious steps, the lion lifted his head not in warning, but almost in recognition, as if remembering the ranger from the night before. But then the lion's gaze drifted back to the door. His focus never strayed for long. Hours ticked by. The sun climbed higher, scorching the earth until waves of heat shimmered around the farmhouse. The lion didn't seek shade. He didn't attempt to hunt. His stomach growled loud enough for the rangers to hear, but he ignored it. Every instinct that should have driven him to survive was locked behind something stronger, an unyielding need to stay exactly where he was. On the second day, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint smell of decay. Michael noticed dried blood clinging beneath the lion's fur along the rib cage. Not a fresh wound, something older, perhaps a fight with another male or an injury sustained while hunting. It didn't seem severe, but without rest or food, even the strongest lion could weaken quickly. The lion licked the wound only once, then resumed his vigil. That night, the plains echoed with distant roars, rival males perhaps, or a calling to the pride. The lion on the porch lifted his head, listening. His ears twitched, his muscles tightened, as though instinct demanded he respond. But after a long pause, he lowered his head again, releasing a soft exhale. Something held him there, stronger than instinct, stronger than fear. He waited. On the third day, a group of villagers gathered on the ridge above the farmhouse. They whispered theories in hushed voices. Some believed the lion was sick, others that he was cursed, or mourning, or that Walter had tamed him somehow. An older villager remembered seeing Walter walking years ago with a small lion cub trailing behind him. Many dismissed it as fantasy. Now they weren't so sure. Michael, listening to their stories, felt the pieces begin to shift into place, but he couldn't see the full picture yet. By evening, the lion's breaths had grown slower, heavier. Hunger carved deep shadows beneath his ribs. His mane, once full and dignified, sagged slightly in the wind. He looked less like the king of the savannah and more like a creature carrying profound exhaustion. But nothing, not starvation, not thirst, not pain pulled him from the porch. As night fell, the sky exploded with stars. The farmhouse, bathed in moonlight, looked almost unreal, like a ghost of a life now gone. The lion lifted his head toward the window where Walter used to sit with a lantern, reading old field journals or cleaning his camera lenses. The lion stared into that window for a long time, as though trying to summon the man back from memory alone. Michael stood a few yards away, unable to shake the sinking heaviness in his chest. He had seen animals in distress, animals grieving, even animals searching for lost members of their pride. But he had never seen a lion wait like this, with purpose, with patience, with something dangerously close to despair. By the fourth day, the rangers placed water near the steps, careful to retreat quickly. The lion sniffed it, but didn't drink. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, had dulled with exhaustion. He rested his head against the first step again, closing his eyes, but not sleeping. Every sound from inside the house made him lift his head slightly, as though clinging to a hope he could not let go of. On the fifth day, something changed. The lion stood. His legs shook beneath him, but he pushed himself upright. He walked down the steps, then paused at the edge of the yard, staring toward the horizon. Michael felt a chill run through him. The lion wasn't giving up. He was leading them somewhere. When the lion stepped off the porch for the first time in 5 days, a tremor of unease swept through the rangers. Michael signaled for everyone to stay back. The lion's movements were slow but intentional, his paws sinking into the dry soil as he made his way toward the open plains. He paused once, glancing over his shoulder at the farmhouse with a look that carried the weight of finality. Then he continued walking, leaving a trail of heavy prints pressed into the earth. Michael followed at a distance, radio in hand, heart pounding. The other rangers trailed behind him, forming a cautious line. No one dared to approach too quickly. The lion, weak or not, remained a creature capable of ending a human life in a heartbeat. But something about his posture, his lowered tail, his deliberate, almost mournful pace made it clear he wasn't interested in confrontation. He was leading them. The plains stretched endlessly ahead, a vast landscape of tall, whispering grass and scattered acacia trees. The lion moved steadily, never looking back again. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust clung to his mane as he pushed forward. Occasionally he stumbled, but each time he forced himself upright. Something was driving him, something stronger than hunger, thirst, or pain. As they walked, Michael couldn't shake the sense that they were following a map carved not into land, but into the lion's memory. The minutes dragged into an hour. The heat grew unbearable. Sweat dripped from Michael's forehead, stinging his eyes. Yet the lion did not stop. Finally, the terrain began to slope downward, the earth breaking into a rugged formation of rocks and scattered boulders. The lion descended the incline slowly, carefully, pausing every few steps to steady himself. Michael motioned for the team to hold position at the top while he moved closer, keeping enough distance to retreat if needed. The lion reached a narrow crevice between two large rocks, a shadowed slit in the earth barely visible unless someone knew exactly where to look. He lowered his head and released a low, resonant rumble. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't aggression. It was a call. Michael's breath caught in his throat as a faint sound answered from inside the crevice, a soft, trembling cry, weak and ragged. He knelt instinctively, peering into the darkness. At first he saw only shadows. Then the shape became clear. A tiny lion cub, no more than 3 months old, huddled against the dirt wall. Its fur was dull and patchy, its ribs visible beneath its skin. One paw was badly swollen, likely twisted in a fall. Its breathing was rapid, panicked, and far too shallow. The cub tried to stand, but its legs buckled immediately, sending it collapsing into the dust. Michael felt something crack inside him. The adult lion stepped forward, lowering his head to the opening. He nudged the cub gently with his nose, a gesture so tender it erased any remaining doubt. This was his offspring. He had not come to Walter's home searching for himself. He had come searching for help. Michael swallowed hard. "He brought it here," he whispered. "He brought the cub here for Walter." The realization struck like a blow. The lion had carried his dying cub across the savannah, guided by the memory of the only human he had ever trusted, the man who had once saved him when he was helpless and broken, just like this cub was now. But when he arrived, Walter was gone, and the lion had waited 5 long days, hoping the man would return, never understanding that he never would. Michael felt the weight of the truth settle heavily on his shoulders. The lion had not been mourning what he lost. He had been mourning what he needed and could not find. Michael radioed the team. "We need medical supplies now, and a transport crate. The cub won't last another day." The other rangers sprang into action. As they mobilized, the lion lay beside the crevice, his body curled protectively around the opening. His eyes followed every movement. But there was no aggression in them, only fear. Fear for the small life fading beside him. When the rangers arrived with the equipment, Michael approached slowly, speaking in a calm, steady voice. The lion tensed but did not move. His gaze shifted between Michael and the cub, as if weighing trust against instinct. Finally, with a deep exhale, he lowered his head. Permission. Michael reached into the crevice, hands trembling as he lifted the cub. The tiny creature was cold, barely responsive. He could feel its heartbeat fluttering weakly against his palm. He wrapped it in cloth and signaled the others to retreat. As the team carried the cub toward the jeep, the lion took one step forward, then another. But instead of attacking, he simply followed at a distance, his head lowered, his movements slow and uncertain. He wasn't a king in that moment. He was a father begging strangers to save his child, and the truth laid bare the heartbreak of the past 5 days. He had waited in front of Walter's empty house because he believed the man who saved him could save his son too. But he had waited in vain. The rangers worked quickly, loading the fragile cub into the jeep while trying to maintain a respectful distance from the adult lion who watched every movement with a haunted intensity. The morning sun washed over the savannah, but nothing about the scene felt warm. The air trembled with quiet grief. Grief from the lion who did not understand the loss he had returned to, and grief from the humans who now stood in the shadow of a story far larger than themselves. Michael climbed into the back of the jeep, holding the cub against his chest to keep it warm. He glanced out the window as the vehicle began to move. The adult lion followed a few steps, then stopped, standing tall in the rising dust clouds as the engine rumbled away. His mane caught the sunlight, glowing like a fading ember. He didn't roar. He didn't chase. He simply watched, his expression carved with the agony of helplessness. Back at the farmhouse, Michael instructed the team to set up a makeshift treatment area on the porch, the very place where the lion had waited for 5 days. He laid the cub gently onto a blanket and began assessing its injuries. The small creature whimpered faintly, barely strong enough to lift its head. Its eyes, cloudy with pain, searched blindly for comfort. Michael exhaled slowly. "You're going to make it," he murmured, though his own voice wavered. "You have to." But as he worked, he couldn't escape the ghost lingering around the farm. The walls, the windows, the worn wooden steps, all still carried the imprint of Walter Hayes. It felt as though the old man might walk out of the house at any moment, carrying his weathered medical kit and a steady determination to save yet another fragile life. Instead, there was only silence. The truth weighed heavily on Michael. Walter had dedicated years to understanding and loving the lion he once rescued, Through every photo in Walter's journals, through every account from neighbors, through every dusty memory scattered around the farmhouse, Michael could see it clearly. The old man never stopped caring. He never stopped believing the lion would survive, grow, and thrive. And now, the lion had returned with a plea Walter would never hear. As Michael applied salve to the cub's swollen paw, he imagined Walter kneeling in that exact spot, whispering soft encouragement the way he had when tending the injured cub years ago. His absence felt like an open wound stretching across the porch. Even the breeze seemed to move more slowly here, hesitant to disturb the quiet grief. When the sun began to set, the rangers heard a familiar rumble. The adult lion had returned, emerging from the tall grass like a ghost retracing its steps. He approached the porch with slow, deliberate movements, stopping a few feet from the steps, his eyes fixed on the blanket where his cub lay. Michael felt his throat tighten. The lion was thinner now. 5 days without food had carved sharp angles into his body. But despite the weakness, there was still nobility in the way he stood, still courage in the way he held his head high. He looked past Michael, past the rangers, past the fear, and focused only on the fragile life he had fought to save. "I wish he were here," Michael whispered, barely audible. "I wish Walter could see this." The lion lowered himself onto the ground, folding his legs neatly as though settling into a vigil. His tail curled around his body, and he released a faint, trembling breath. The porch creaked in the cooling air. Crickets began their evening chorus. Somewhere in the distance, hyenas laughed into the coming night. But here, surrounded by the remnants of a man who had once saved him, the lion bowed his head. It was not an act of surrender. It was an act of mourning for Walter, for the cub, for a promise that lived on even after the man who made it was gone. The night deepened into a velvet darkness, and the air around the farmhouse grew still. Michael stayed beside the cub, checking its breathing every few minutes. The small creature clung to life like a flickering flame, trembling but refusing to go out. The adult lion, resting at the foot of the porch, never took his eyes off the cub. Even exhaustion could not pull him away. As dawn approached, a faint stream of light crept across the porch. The cub stirred, releasing a weak cry that echoed through the quiet morning. It was enough to send a shiver down Michael's spine. Progress small, fragile, but real. "We're not losing you," he whispered, adjusting the blanket around the cub. The adult lion heard the cry too. He stood slowly, limbs stiff from the long night. He moved to the bottom of the porch steps and watched with a hopeful tension, his amber eyes reflecting the rising sun. Michael met the lion's gaze and nodded once, a silent promise that he would keep fighting. The rangers brought additional supplies, antibiotics, fluids, and fresh milk. Working carefully, Michael administered a small dose of medication and helped the cub drink from a syringe. Each swallow seemed like a victory. After several minutes, the cub's breathing steadied, no longer rapid and shallow, but slow and rhythmic. "Good," Michael murmured. "Stay with us." The lion seemed to sense the change. He relaxed his shoulders and lowered himself back down, tail flicking once in relief. For the first time since arriving at the farmhouse, he closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in the first moment of fragile peace. By midday, the cub was strong enough to lift its head. It peered around with hazy eyes, searching for the familiar presence that had protected it through the harsh savanna nights. When it spotted the lion at the steps, it released a small, broken mule. The lion rose immediately. He stepped closer, slow and careful, until he stood at the edge of the porch. Michael held his breath but didn't move. The lion leaned forward, inhaling the cub's scent, touching it gently with the tip of his nose. The cub pressed its tiny head weakly against his mane. The reunion was silent, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "Go on," Michael said quietly. "He's yours." With the ranger's steady presence giving him confidence, the lion climbed onto the porch, each step deliberate and respectful, as if he understood he was standing on sacred ground. He lay beside the cub, curling his massive body protectively around it. The cub nestled into the warmth, purring softly, its fragile frame rising and falling with regained strength. For a moment, Michael imagined Walter kneeling beside them, smiling the gentle smile he had worn whenever a wounded creature found its way into his care. The thought tightened Michael's chest, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose. Saving the cub wasn't just for the lion, it was for Walter too. A final act echoing the compassion that had defined the old man's life. As the afternoon sun brightened the sky, Michael stepped back and signaled the rangers. "We need to give them space," he said. "They deserve this." The men retreated quietly, leaving the lion and his recovering cub together on the porch that had once been the heart of Walter's world. The silence that settled over the farmhouse was no longer heavy with grief. It was filled with hope. Morning broke gently over the savanna, soft rays of sunlight spilling across the golden grasslands and washing the farmhouse in a quiet glow. The porch, once a place of heavy sorrow, now held a fragile sense of renewal. The cub slept nestled against its father's chest, its breathing steady, its small paws twitching as if dreaming. The adult lion stayed perfectly still, not daring to disturb the life he had almost lost. Michael watched from a distance, leaning against the railing with tired eyes but a grateful heart. He had spent years working with wildlife, witnessing both the brutality and the beauty that shaped the African plains. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment, a lion laying peacefully where Walter once sat, guarding a cub the way a man might guard his own child. As the sun climbed higher, the cub blinked awake. It looked up at its father with newfound strength, then attempted to stand. Its legs trembled, but the lion responded instantly, nudging the cub gently to steady it. The cub let out a small, determined growl, and Michael couldn't help but smile. "You're a fighter," he said softly. The lion lifted his head, ears twitching toward Michael's voice. Their eyes met, and for a breathless second, Michael felt something pass between them, a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding of what had been lost and what had been saved. But beneath that quiet triumph lingered something deeper. Walter. His presence clung to the farmhouse like a shadow that refused to fade, and today the rangers had come prepared to address that final piece of unfinished grief. From the jeep, Michael retrieved a small wooden urn. It was simple, weathered, and carried the ashes of the man who had devoted his final years to kindness, a man who saved a lion that would one day return in an act of devotion no one could have predicted. The farmhouse felt incomplete without him, and Michael believed the land itself waited for closure. He walked slowly toward the old acacia tree, standing a short distance from the porch. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade the way a guardian offers protection. Walter had spent countless afternoons beneath this tree, sorting photographs, writing in his journals, or simply listening to the sounds of the savanna. It had been his refuge, his companion, and the silent keeper of his memories. As Michael knelt at the base of the tree, the lion rose from the porch. He did not roar or threaten. Instead, he stepped closer with measured, almost reverent movements. For a moment, he stood beside the porch steps, watching with an expression that seemed almost human in its depth. The cub followed shakily, leaning against its father for support. Michael placed the urn gently into the earth and covered it with soil. His hands shook, but his movements remained steady. When he finished, he whispered, "You're home now, Walter." A breeze drifted through the branches, rustling the leaves with a soft whisper. The lion took a step forward, then another, stopping only a few feet from the tree. His massive head lowered. He inhaled deeply, taking in the scent of the land Walter had loved. It was a moment no camera could capture, and no words could fully describe a creature of raw instinct standing in quiet tribute to the man who had once saved him. A father standing over the resting place of the only human he had ever trusted. The cub pressed closer to his leg, looking up at the mound of freshly turned earth. It didn't understand the meaning, but it seemed to sense the significance, leaning into the warmth of its father's mane. Michael stepped back, giving them the space they deserved. The rangers stood in silence, each one feeling the gravity of the moment settle deep into their bones. After several minutes, the lion lifted his head. The wind tugged at his mane, carrying the scent of the earth, the tree, the farmhouse, and Walter. He turned toward the porch, gave one final look as if memorizing every detail, then nudged the cub gently toward the open plains. It was time to go home. The cub stumbled forward with newfound strength. The lion walked beside it, every step steady, protective, patient. They moved beyond the farmhouse, through the tall waves of grass, toward a world waiting to reclaim them. Halfway across the field, the lion paused. He looked back at the farmhouse, the place where he had been saved, the place where he had waited, the place where he had mourned. For a long moment, he stood perfectly still, his figure framed by the rising sun. Then, with a low rumble that rolled across the plains like a final promise, he turned away. Michael felt tears prick his eyes. "Goodbye," he whispered. The lion and his cub disappeared slowly into the vastness of the savannah, becoming silhouettes, then shadows, then nothing at all. But the story they left behind of love, loyalty, and an unbroken bond remained etched into the soil, the farmhouse, and the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. And under the acacia tree, Walter Hayes rested at last, not alone, but forever remembered by the lion he once saved, and the cub whose life he saved again through the hands of others.